We are in June of the year 2013. Hear my words. By June of 2017, it will no longer be a violation of federal law to buy, use, possess, or have a licensed sale for marijuana in the United States of America. By a minimum of 2 years after that, everybody in our country will link arms and look back and be aghast and astonished that we could have perpetuated this failed system of marijuana prohibition for so long. It will be that clear. This has not been an easy road. We have heard already today of the long time that this has been going on. I myself have been speaking since 1992, where I held a press conference as a sitting trial court judge in a conservative Orange County, California, saying our nation's drug policy is wrong and we must change it. But what my purpose is today, among others, is to thank you. You folks are the one at NORML that are bringing this about. You folks were in Colorado. You folks were in the state of Washington. Yes, the state of Oregon where it didn't work. You have helped us in California. And one fellow is really, and I'm asking him to stand up and take a bow and accept our plaudits and our applause. And that's a fellow by the name of Keith Stroop right over there. Keith, stand up, and thank you. Thank you. And there are more. You know, it's amazing. Some of the truly best people I've ever met in my life, I have met because of drug policy reform. Some of them have been in prison. Some of them are still addicted to drugs. Others are like me that has never used any form of illicit drug. However, there are groups, and they have come at the same conclusions we have from vastly different avenues, vastly different lives, which only reinforces the true fact that we know we're onto something here. What we're doing must change. One of these folks, by the way, is here also, and I'm going to ask a fellow from the name of Rob Campy of Marijuana Policy Project to stand up. Again, Rob, thank you for what you have done all the way around. And one of the great groups, you know, people can't figure us out. I've been a LEAP speaker now ever since basically it began 10, 11 years ago. A law enforcement against prohibition, and we saw Terry speak earlier, but I'm just proud to be a member of this organization because we have the credentials, we have the handcuffs, and we have all of the various accoutrements. And so LEAP, again, is a wonderful organization that does this. Terry, please stand up on behalf of LEAP, and thank you for those efforts. But there's so much more to do. So much more to do. Yes, 4 years from now, marijuana basically will allow each state to decide how to address this, and I'm perfectly confident in knowing how that's going to come about. And so my prognosis continues, Keith. You're going to work yourself out of work, out of a business here. So and that's a wonderful thing. However, you're not going to go away because you're going to become the National Organization for the Reform of Drug Laws. It's going to be NORML, okay? That's what's going to happen with you because there's so much more to be done. Let's talk about the fact, and we've seen the various graphs, and I'm blessing you by not having any PowerPoint presentation. But we've seen that the United States of America leads the world in the incarceration of our people. And here I assure you, we're number one does not make me proud. There are so many people that once we regulate and control marijuana, are we going to open the jails and prison for anybody with a marijuana offense? No, we're not. But we're going to have a commission to look at each one of these cases individually. And if you're there for a crime that's no longer a crime, you're going to be released immediately. And we're going to look at people, yes, if they succumbed, because money is the big deal here. Money is driving the bus, both for the good guys and the bad guys. But if you're there because you sold marijuana for money when it was illegal, okay, but if you got a 30-year sentence, for heaven's sake, when 5 would have been plenty, or 2, release those people. But we have so very many people in prison today, and I'm going to ask NORML to look into this and continue on with this approach. The United States of America has something in the order of 5% of all of the population of the world and 25% of its prisoners. Either we are really the worst people in the world or we're doing something wrong. Which do you think it is? But again, the problem is money. And I ask people, because in any program you're going to put in, whatsoever, there are always some winners and some losers, right? Some people come out ahead, some people come out behind. And that's true in education and it's true in healthcare. I assure you it's true with regard to drug policy. So ask yourself, who's winning today? And it's clear, I have 6 groups, see if you agree with me. But the first is the big-time drug dealers. You know, the Mexican drug cartels, Hell's Angels is doing real well, thank you very much. Juvenile street gangs, that sort of thing. They're winning. They're coming out ahead. Second group are, you know, those juvenile street gangs. They're using it as a recruiting tool. It's just disgusting. If we're concerned about our children, and we've heard about that, is real true. And Russ, thank you for your presentation. In fact, thanks big time. But people realize what we're doing isn't working. I go out and ask questions all the time. I spoke to every Rotary Club that I can think of within a 25 miles radius of where I live. And you ask them, when you begin, how many of you, forget my views, use your own insights, your own experience, how many of you believe that we in the United States of America are in better shape today than we were 5 years ago with regard to this critical issue of drug abuse and all the crime and misery that goes with it? Nobody raises their hands. They understand that that's not true. Why? Why do we perpetuate this failed system? For one reason, and that one reason is children. We want to keep our children away from a lifestyle of drug use and drug selling. Yes? That's why we do this. But I was in juvenile court for several years, and I can tell you, I can tell anyone, that because of drug prohibition, we are putting our children in harm's way for 2 extremely important reasons. The first is, like you've already heard, it's easier today for our young people to get marijuana or methamphetamines if they want to than it is alcohol. Why? Because the alcohol dealers ask for ID and the illegal drug dealers don't. So don't trust me. Ask the first 10 teenagers you find, which is easier for you to get if you want to, and that's the answer you will get. Number 2. And here's something people do not focus on. If I'm a drug dealer, ask yourself, how much risk-taking can I buy for $50 in cash from a 15, 16-year-old in the inner city or anywhere else? And the answer is quite a bit, yes? Drug dealers, $50 is chump change. I use them as cheap labor. But for a kid, $50 is a lot of money. So as a result, I can recruit all of the young people I want to sell my drugs into. I use them as couriers, I use them as lookouts, use them as gophers, whatever. And then, this is the kicker, as night follows day, as soon as their reliability is established, I will trust them to go out and sell small amounts of drugs in the communities. Why would I do such a despicable thing? And the answer to that is easy. Money. More money for the kid, more money for me. Ask yourself this question. If you have a 14, 15-year-old selling drugs in his or her community, who are these young people going to sell to? Us? No, they're going to be selling to their 14, 15, 16-year-old peers, thus recruiting more children to this very lifestyle of drug usage and drug selling that we say we're trying to keep away from them, and it is caused by drug prohibition. That is the nail that we've got to drive into the casket of drug prohibition. There's a third group as well, and that is, and you heard it just earlier, and thank you for that. Is marijuana a gateway drug? And the answer is no. It's been exploded completely for all of the traditional arguments. But yes, it is a gateway drug for 3 reasons. The first is, like you heard, it is a gateway to prison. It is the gateway to the hell of prison that Mr. Obama did not, fortunately for him, find. Or a guy named Michael Phelps, pretty decent swimmer. Or Bill Clinton or George W. Bush. So that is a gateway drug. And another one is because it's illegal, They have to associate with people that are selling illegal products, and they have every interest in getting our kids hooked on a stronger drug. And so, yes, they will end up selling the marijuana and then say, hey, you want some other stuff? You can actually buy this too. Let me pass along to you an experience that I had while I was still, in effect, a drug warrior. I was on the bench, and you see in your own courtroom what you're doing. You're churning low-level drug offenders through the system for no good purpose. And I can still remember there were about 4 different occasions in which I sentenced young men for being under the influence of methamphetamines. And in California, it's still a violation of law, 11550 of the Health and Safety Code, mandatory minimum sentence of 90 days. I wasn't about to give them any more than that. I couldn't give them any less. All of this is by reason of saying they had no reason to lie to me. Your Honor, at time of sentencing, they would tell me, my drug of choice is marijuana. And I would buy my marijuana from the same supplier. And one day, unbeknownst to me, they sold me some marijuana laced with methamphetamines. I smoked it a few times and got hooked. I keep thinking to myself, look, I don't smoke cigarettes. I'm really concerned about my health. But at least if I do that, it's harmful for the user. But if I go to my local mini-mart and buy a pack of Marlboros, it's not going to be laced with methamphetamines. That's an issue that we can address really well. So these are all things that are inflicted upon us by drug prohibition. I deeply believe that the most patriotic, most effective thing I can do for my country that I love is help us repeal drug prohibition. It is harming us, it is harming our children, it is harming anything you can talk about. You talk to your Rotary clubs and I'll confront them. You name any area of society you want to, and I will show you to your satisfaction how it is made worse because of drug prohibition. The environment, healthcare, education, balance of payments, you name it, crime, any of those things are made worse because of drug prohibition. By the way, I'm off the track. What's the third group? Third group are the people in law enforcement that are paid increasingly large monies to fight against the first 2 groups. And I'm not pointing the finger at law enforcement and saying you failed us. That's simply not true. And we can demonstrate that they're getting more arrests, unfortunately, more longer prison sentences, seizing greater amounts of drugs than ever before. Blaming law enforcement today is like blaming Eliot Ness for the failure of alcohol prohibition. It's not the fault of law enforcement, it's the system. But nevertheless, their fiefdoms, their power, their money continues to expand. They're winning. Fourth group of people that are winning, politicians. Politicians that talk tough with regard to the war on drugs. Not smart, just tough. But they continue to get elected and re-elected on those efforts. And of course, that's our fault for allowing this to happen. But they continue to win. Fifth group of people that are winning, those in the private sector that make money because of increased crime. Who might that be? Building prisons, really a lucrative thing to do. Staffing prisons. I don't know about Texas, but I probably do. But in California, what's the strongest political lobby group in our state? And it is Prison Guards Union. Probably the same thing here. They're winning. They're making money because of increased crime. And the sixth, this is something that the people of our country have not focused on, but they really, really should. It's the terrorists of the world. Ask yourself, what is the primary source of funding, Osama bin Laden on down, for terrorist groups around the world? And it is drug prohibition, the sale and the protection for the sale of illegal drugs. If our government really cared about fighting terrorism, they would adopt the one thing most effective to fight against them, and that is to take away their funding. And with tears in my eyes, I tell you, the government of the United States doesn't seem to care that much. They won't even discuss that one hugely important issue. I say that drug prohibition is the golden goose of terrorism, and it's true. Who is losing? Everybody else, particularly our children. This is not a time for complacency. Even if I'm right, which I'm convinced I am, with regard to 4 years from now, the federal government will be out of it. In fact, I can tell you a little more hope on that. I was in the federal system. I was a federal prosecutor in Los Angeles. Actually held the record for the largest drug prosecution in the Central District of California back in 1978. It was 75 kilos of heroin, 160 pounds was and is a whole bunch of heroin. Does anyone have a concept of what the Record prosecution is today in the Central District of California, 18 tons of cocaine in one place. So you can figure out progress we're making, right? But you go back and look at this, I can tell you directly, the federal government does not like to lose. And if they're going to prosecute somebody in Colorado or the state of Washington for possession or sale of marijuana that is not illegal, in fact, it is now legalized in Colorado and Washington, what are they going to have to do? They're going to have to go to a jury of people from Colorado or Washington. And every last one of them will know that this is no longer a violation of Colorado law. They're going to look at the feds and say, you're a bunch of bullies. Get out of town. They don't want to lose. They're not going to take that on. They can go through these surreptitious ways of tracking your bank accounts and sending letters to your landlords and the rest of that stuff, but they're going to run out of gas. They're going to back off as well they should. So this is all in the future. We can do this. We can take these monies, huge amounts of monies, and use them for something that would be actual profitable. In California, we tried mightily to have an initiative on the ballot in last November 2012 called Regulate Marijuana Like Wine. And we got some money, and we actually put together, from some LEAP speakers and others, we put together a really, really good initiative from my standpoint. And we then got some money, and we actually then spent that money on a poll. And the poll came back that the question was asked, would you legalize marijuana? And 55% of the high propensity voters said yes. And it really isn't legalization because there's regulation and control. So when we said, asked in the poll then, would you treat marijuana like wine? It was something like 59 to 62% of the voters. So it was going to pass. We were able to get this to then, this initiative, to the California Attorney General's office. And they went through and they then fashioned the language that would accompany our initiative had we gotten it on the ballot. And you know what they said? This isn't us, this is the California Attorney General's office. And they said, if this passes, it will save tens of millions of dollars every year in enforcement costs. And it will generate hundreds of millions of dollars every year for revenues. Wouldn't it be better to take these monies, like we were hearing earlier from Russ? You know, in the state of California, what's the largest cash crop today? Marijuana. Number 2 is grapes, by the way, if you care. So you go all these miles and miles of vineyards, but marijuana is a larger cash crop in California. So it's here anyway. That implies to me somebody's using it, okay? So let's take this money, take away a whole bunch of money from juvenile street gangs and Mexican drug cartels and other thugs, and actually use it to pay our firefighters, pay our teachers, fix our roads. It's not a bad idea. It's going to work. It's going to resonate. I subscribe to this. We in the Libertarian Party, yes, we believe in freedom. Yes, we believe in liberty. And Alan, thank you for your presentation. But we also believe in responsibility. And those are the messages that we need to bring to our fellow people in NORML and around the country that favor these changes. Do it responsibly. And in fact, in California, for our initiative, we wouldn't have any of these green leaves on our advertising, and we wouldn't have any people smoking, etc. We would talk about the issues straightforwardly, but talk about it directly to them, to mothers and the fathers and the parents, and the financial responsibility issue. So this is where we're going. It's going to work. The most patriotic, effective thing that any of us can do for ourselves, for our children, for our country, is to get this done. One more thing that you need to focus on. I was also on the Abused and Neglected Children calendar for several years as a judge. You've been on the bench for 25 years and you pretty much do everything. And about every 3, 4, 5 weeks, I would have the following factual scenario come into my courtroom. I would have a single mother, let's say a single mother of 2, and she would make a mistake, big mistake. That is, she'd choose the wrong boyfriend, and the boyfriend would be out selling drugs, and that's just the way life was. So one fine day, he'd look at her and say, well, tell you what, Helen, if you take this package across town and give it to Charlie, I'll pay you $500. And she'd basically know it contained narcotics, but you know, I'm going that way anyway. $500 will help pay half my month's rent. I kind of need the money, so okay, I'll do it. And so she'd get arrested. She'd get convicted and sentenced to prison for 5 years for transporting 4 ounces of cocaine or whatever it would be. And honestly, in today's system, 5 years in prison for that much cocaine is not that unreasonable a sentence. I disagree with it, but that's pretty much where we are. Let me ask you a question. When you arrest and incarcerate a mother, what happens to her children? And the answer to that is really easy. She has legally abandoned her children because she's not there to take care of them, so they come to me on the abused and neglected children calendar. So now I have this woman, she's in a jail jumpsuit, she's got handcuffs on. I look at her and tell her the honest truth, which is, you understand you're not going to be a part of your children's lives for the next 5 years. And she starts to well up with tears. Wouldn't you? And then I tell her the God's honest truth, which is, unless you're really lucky, and either have somebody that's willing both to take custody and control of your children for the next 5 years, they're probably going to be adopted by somebody else by the time you get out of prison. And she starts to weep. Wouldn't you? But if that's not enough, because in California, or at least in Orange County, a lot of people are conservative, they don't think of the human issue. But I can have the taxpayers start to weep also, because you know it's going to cost us something in the order of $5,000 per month per child to keep these kids in a group home until they're adopted. And so for the next year, we're going to be spending $60,000 times 2 children. That's $120,000, plus another $30,000 to keep the mother incarcerated. We're going to be spending $150,000 of taxpayer money physically to separate a mother from her children. And guess who gets to enforce this whole situation? I do, but I don't have to do it quietly. It's an atrocity. It's an atrocity that we are inflicting upon ourselves. So I ask you, this is not the time to get complacent. Yes, Colorado and Washington, we now can see that proverbial light at the end of the tunnel. It's there, it's in view, it's here, and it's irrevocable unless we get complacent. Let's keep this moving forward. The people that have done this, I've already talked about NORML, I've talked about MPP, there's the Drug Policy Alliance, there's LEAP, there's also Governor Gary Johnson. You know, I saw this man, I'd never heard of him before. As I told you, in 1992, I started doing this publicly. Never heard of Governor Johnson before until I opened up my newspaper in 1999. And I looked on it and saw, hey, this governor, present sitting governor of the state of New Mexico, has said he's conducted what he called his own audit and sees that the whole issue of drug prohibition isn't working and we've got to change it. And I thought to myself, wow, that's exactly the type of person we need. So when he started running for president, he was even then a Republican, I started saying publicly he's the most qualified person to be president that I know of. And then he became a libertarian and I started saying he's the most qualified person to be president I know of. Maybe I said it a few too many times, so he asked me to be his running mate, so now what am I supposed to say? But I did that and I was proud to do that. In so many different ways, and Alan mentioned some, and you should know some as well. This is the person that we really need to guide our government, to do the right thing for the right reason. No ego, just going to do the right thing. So I am proud to have done this. We tried hard in this campaign. You are our natural constituents. You know, the more you look into what we stand for, what we would do, what Governor Gary Johnson did do while he was governor of New Mexico, you will find that we have found a home with the Libertarian Party. I have. It's really the right place to be. We need to be in the presidential debates. Had we been in the presidential debates last time, I think we would have been highly competitive. We might have even won this election. That so many people that put an X by Mr. Obama's name basically just were voting against Romney. And so many people who put an X by Romney's name were just voting against Obama. They never would have voted for each other. They would have voted for us had we seen as being viable. I'm trying everything I can to encourage Governor Johnson to run for president again in 2016. But we need that encouragement. It's got to happen. So I thank you for the invitation. It's always a pleasure to share thoughts with good people. The problem is, and it's inherent with this group, and the problem is we all sit around agreeing how smart we are and it doesn't take us anywhere. I tell that with libertarians, you know, how many people are not libertarian in this libertarian crowd? You know, there aren't enough. We've got to spread it out. We've got to get more and more people understanding that this is a self-inflicted wound like you cannot believe. I go around now saying, I started saying drug policy isn't working. I now say that drug prohibition is the biggest failed policy in the history of the United States of America, second only to slavery, and it's true. I will leave you with a story. The story is that there was this man who was on his deathbed, very end of his life, and he knew it. So he called his wife to his side and said, well, dear, there's just something I have to get off my chest. That for numbers of years now, I've been having an affair with such and such a woman that lives across the street. And I don't mean to hurt your feelings, but I think you have a right to hear this and hear it from me. She looked at him. She thought for a moment. Then she said, that's okay. I know. That's why I poisoned you. Well, in such a similar way, we are poisoning ourselves by this policy of drug prohibition. You know, how it began, we can go back and reconstruct it. They were really crafty, I guess. You know, they didn't prohibit narcotics with the Harrison Anti-Narcotics Act. They just made it a tax violation. They didn't prohibit marijuana. It was the Marijuana Tax Act. So you can sell marijuana from me to you if you want to. You sell me $10 worth of marijuana, but they put a $30 tax on it, and then if you don't pay the tax, it's a violation. That sort of thing. It only became illegal with Richard Nixon and with the Controlled Substances Act in 1971. But by that time, people were pretty much accustomed to it. This is a self-inflicted wound. Yes, some of these drugs can be harmful. Yes, they can be addictive and harmful drugs. And probably, as Governor Johnson says, maybe 10% of the drug problems in our country today are because of the drugs themselves. I'm not minimizing them. I want you to be careful. Many of those drugs problems, of course, are caused because they're illegal and the quality problems and the rest. But 90% of those problems are drug prohibition problems, are drug money problems. Ask Mexico. You know, Mexico doesn't have a drug problem, but the drug money problems have killed those 60,000 people in the last 5 years, etc. It's our drug money that's done it. You folks are closer to Mexico, although California isn't that far away either. These are things that we have done to ourselves, to our children, to our country, and the world. Let's galvanize, let's move now. We see the light at the end of that tunnel. Let's keep going, let's do this. Let's not argue with each other. Let's gather forces and get this done. Thank you so much for the opportunity of speaking with you. Good luck to you all. Thank you.